Okay, let's get going with the second session for today's programme. We've got Dr. Terence Lewis. I'm afraid we've spelled his name wrong on the slide. Apologies for that. He's from Energist Consulting. Take it away.
Thank you. Good morning, or afternoon as it is now. I'm Dr. Terence Lewis. I'm a local guy. I run a local consulting practice, specialling in low carbon economy and energy efficiency, based in the Hive on Victoria Avenue. I'd like to talk to you today about the benefits of energy efficiency and the low carbon agenda, in how it affects the wider community, the planet, and the individuals at home, so that I can help understand where I'm going with the talk today. Could I ask, please, how many people here today have an interest in business energy for their place of work? Thank you. 1, 2, 3. And the rest of you, no doubt, are very interested in your domestic energy, saving money at home, becoming green. Would that be correct? Yeah, great. Thank you. So we're going to start with the top 10 energy saving tips that can help reduce your carbon emissions and save you money. Okay, to start at the top, try and take this off. That's better. Some very basic ways to save your costs. It's the easiest way in any organisation to improve your energy management. Think about how you're using your energy at home. How many people leave lights on when they're not in the room? Let's be honest. Do you leave your lights on? Yes. How many people go up the shops and leave the heating on? No? We're all very good here. Great. Okay, other areas. But one of the basic principles is conservation before generation. The first place to start within any home or building, if you want to save money, is try to insulate the fabric of the building. I would look at things like loft insulation, double glazing, blocking up any drafts that are in the home, and turning down your thermostat. Instead of having the thermostat at 20 degrees, turn it down to 19 or possibly 18 degrees, because it's amazing how many people, when it's cold outside, think they have to have the thermostat at maximum temperatures, and that wastes it. Turning the thermostat down by 1 degree centigrade can save up to 10% on your energy bill. Now, when you think how much your energy bills are coming in, what's the average energy bill here a month for some people? 100 quid? 60 quid? Pardon? 30. And you haven't got a thermostat, you're doing very good. So it's important to keep it down as low as you can and really minimise the costs. So really your solutions here: reduce waste, maximise anything. If you're in business, you maximise your production. Look after your energy. If you can't get a professional or someone to look at your bills, look at it yourself and see what months and where and how you're actually spending the most money. If you can get it, well, a lot of people now have real-time monitoring tools. The energy companies give you a little monitor so you can see it going up and down. If you haven't got one, ask them if they'll supply one, and then have a little game. How low can we get our energy today? Can we beat it tomorrow? Yeah? Again, looking around, there is some more low green carbon energy financing coming for the domestic sector to help the domestic sector become more energy efficient. Still waiting for it to be released, and apparently it's European money that's been ring-fenced before we come out of Europe, so we can have some of that. And also identifying technologies that can deliver the quickest payback within your home. Such again, there is a thermostat to go on a wall called a chronotherm. That's time and temperature. That means you can program it at the beginning of the week for what you're doing that week, so you don't have to mess around turning your temperature up and down, and you can get the most out of it. Again, when looking at what you want to do with energy, there is a very simple circle we have here. First thing you need to understand is get some training or talk to some experts to find out what you really need to home into for use within your home or within your business if you're in business. Look at what solutions are available that you can implement and then review what you're doing as you're going round. Be committed. Put something together within the family to organise for action. Another simple thing saving a lot of energy in the home is when you're cooking. Don't just cook one meal at a time. Try and cook a meal so that it will last for 2 meals. You can save it for the next day in the fridge, or you can freeze it and bring it out later and warm it up. Otherwise, you'd be surprised. You can cut your gas bill down in the oven by about 50%. Going all the way through, and then audit. Keep an idea of what you're spending. Keep records. Look back on the records, and you're trying to get your numbers down every month on what your energy bill is. Yeah. And then if you want to, and you're really geeky into it, you can start making yourself a little spreadsheet and some graphs and do quite a lot there. And again, moving more into the business sector, targeting and monitoring your systems is very important. There's a lot of stuff you can do once you've got the information. If you don't know where you're at or where you've been, how do you really know where you're going? So do take some time to look at it and understand where you're wasting money on energy. Paybacks. It's equally as important in the home as it is in business. Low energy lamps. If you change the standard fluorescent lights and the incandescent light bulbs in your area, you'll get an immediate payback within 1 to 12 months. That will save you 66% a year on the lighting portion of your energy bill. Is that worth having? Definitely. Again, in the commercial sector, anyone who's involved in the commercial sector, where you've got things like this, motors, old-fashioned motors, draw a lot of energy. Changing the motor for a modern, efficient motor that's electronically controlled, possibly with a battery backup, you'll get a payback on that within 3 to 12 months. Again, if you think of a factory where they might have 200 or 300 of these in the factory, or 30 even, that's a lot of saving over the year. Okay, I'll just stop, see if there's any questions at this stage, please. Yes, lady behind you.
Hi, I've been trying to make my home more efficient, but there's so much information out there. Where do so I want to replace my windows, but what type of windows, from what place? I'd like to have like an air source pump, again, where from? So is there any place that you can kind of recommend that would help domestic householders in their journey, I guess?
Yes, that's a very good question, and it's an area where there needs to be a lot more credibility. I've been in the industry, particularly on renewables and low carbon agenda, since the feed-in tariffs dropped in 2014. One of the challenges we've had is there are a lot of people with Stetsons out there who sell renewable energy technology with wondrous dreams beyond its capability, and it's often not installed properly. So my real advice would be talk to a professional, somebody like myself, I'm not blowing my own trumpet, who will give you genuine advice and ideas of where to go, or ask amongst your friends who have gone down that road, who have they used, what have they bought, and are they happy? It's also worth talking to local trading standards officers. They may well be able to give you some advice as to particular companies that they would suggest you avoid. Well, a lot of what I do is within the consulting agenda is I sit down with people, I understand what they want to do, I'll give them a plan of action, some ideas of budget costings, and a direction in people to speak to get it. For the people who can afford it, quite often I get engaged as well, mainly on the commercial sector, to oversee what's being done and make sure that everything is done to the proper standards and signed off properly. But unfortunately, it's still a bit of a minefield. So really my best advice is find someone who's registered with the appropriate trader standards, trading standards associations, and talk to friends and see what their experiences are. Okay. Okay, first thing to do. It's always important when you're looking at a low carbon future to actually have a vision. Understand where you're at with your carbon footprint today, on day one, and make a decision as to where you want to go. Do you want to become 100% carbon neutral? That will be very difficult, but would a start be to save 20% of your carbon footprint today? Give it 6 months, a year, and work towards the next stage. That is always important. Again, coming back to that, try to partner with a specialist or somebody who can help you develop sustainable, cost-effective, low-carbon solutions. That way, if you're talking to an expert or a specialist, you'll get what you want. After all, if you wanted to build an extension on your house, would you find the odd job man, or would you get an architect to come in and help you design the house to the standards and the qualities you're looking for? It is very much the same in the energy agenda. Make sure you achieve your agenda by identifying all the inefficiencies and quantify the cost of doing nothing. Remember, cost of energy is going up, but it's not just the cost of the energy that you need to consider. All the time that you're wasting energy, you're generating a larger carbon footprint. So you're wasting money, generating a larger carbon footprint, polluting the atmosphere. So it's important to decide where your priorities are. Is it just money? Is it reducing the carbon footprint? And is it doing something that will make the environment better for yourself, your family, and your neighbours? Then start looking at introducing practical solutions that will increase the efficiency and reduce the carbon footprint. That's behavioural change and technology. Introduce the solutions also with a finance arrangement. A lot of finance companies now are offering green finance packages. Therefore, you can borrow the money at a very low rate of interest, providing it's for green economy and green finance. Results is you end up with a more sustainable and profitable business or a home that is lower to run and you've got more money left in your purse. There is some funding coming back out from Low Case South East for commercial energy, and that is going to be based on a funding up for 20% of the project cost, capped at £10,000. Sorry, 100,000. But we are waiting at the moment for that to come through. So once again, to summarise, if you're in a business, any business that have reduced their carbon footprint through energy efficiency, waste mitigation, pollution reduction, automatically become a green business and benefit from increased profit, reputational enhancement, and opportunities in new markets. Thank you. I think the gentleman in front has a question.
Yeah, I ran a PV installation company.
Sorry?
I ran a PV installation company, and I was one of the businesses that went under quite rapidly when the...
Sorry, can you just move forward if you stand up?
When the feed-in tariff was drastically, illegally slashed by the government. Do you know if there's any, you were saying there's some funding coming back, do you know if that is focused at all towards the PV industry?
Well, the answer is the feed-in tariffs were actually, I want to tell you the big picture here. The feed-in tariffs were very high and very generous originally, and the reason was the government wanted to stimulate the market. And there was a big, big rush for solar to go on roofs of houses. But there was a budget set that once it reached a certain point, it was going to be withdrawn or reduced. Everybody knew that from day one. And the solar energy, it actually took off better than the government had expected. The money got spent, so it had to be ring-fenced to be paid out, ahead of the expected times. Rightly or wrongly, they decided on this date the solar PV tariffs are going to be cut, when they dropped from 14 pence down to about 7 pence at the time. At the time, I was vice chair of the Solar Trade Association, and we had a number of meetings with government, and Caroline Lucas, bless her shoes, she was there with us and supporting it all the way. But the news came, the feed-in tariffs were going to be dropped. From the Solar Trade Association, we gave a word out to our members. Please, cherry pick what you can pick, do the good jobs well, and cut anything that you can't do, just don't do it, and give people deposits back if you have to. The reputable companies did it, and they actually survived. There were many companies who didn't, and they tried to install more solar in a very short space of time than they could. I also was consulting to a number of solar companies around the southeast. I gave them the advice, and they all said, we're not going to do it, we're just going to get it in the best we can. I immediately severed my commercial ties with them. And I waited. A few months later, I was getting calls from housing associations. They had whole estates of homes with solar on the roof that wasn't working. The roofs were leaking. In some cases, the solar panels were still on the lawn in the back garden. On check-in with the Ofgem website, where solar panel installations were supposed to be installed, we discovered that solar installations that the paperwork said were on the roof and working were still in the box in the garden. So I actually made a lot of money over the next 2 years with the housing associations, putting all of that right again. And since then, the solar industry has started to become regulated a lot more, and people are able to move forward. And a lot of the guys that did the dodgy work have gone and have moved out. Moving on and fast-tracking forward to today, the cost of installing solar on a home is just under half, nearly a third of the price it was in 2014. The quality of the panels have improved vastly, and they're more efficient and produce more energy. So there isn't a need to actually have feed-in tariffs anymore. I could sit down with anybody if they want me to afterwards and go through it on a piece of paper, that the return on investment for most homes on a PV installation will be about 3 to 5 years, depending upon the use. A solar panel will last 20 years plus. Electricity is forecast to go up at an inflation rate of between 4 and 6% per year going forward. Now, any mathematicians in the room who understand compound interest, you take that same calculation and you run it as compound savings. So 6% of what you save this year, plus 6% of what you save next year, and 6% of what you save the next year, and you add all those 6% together, it adds up to a lot of money very quickly. So there isn't a need to have the feed-in tariffs. Energy prices are doing it in themselves, but it's more important from a social viewpoint and a personal viewpoint as a homeowner to keep that price, keep it down, and try and live within the means of your home within as much as you can possibly generate. Added to that, of course, batteries have come a long way, And a battery storage will enable a lot of homes to run their home overnight on the battery. Then we bring into the agenda, a lot of people are now transitioning towards electric vehicles. Again, using battery technology and the battery in an electric car, you can share that energy between the home and the vehicle. Therefore, there's a saving all round. But it is important to have somebody do those calculations for you who really understand the mathematics, the finance, and the technical aspects of installing a solar installation correctly. Hello, the gentleman at the back there.
So I'm just green-minded and quite interested in the generation side. And recently I heard about, as a Welsh guy who said a lot of the Welsh farmers are being paid to put up wind turbines on the coast. And the figures he quoted were, for each wind turbine, I think they took a government loan out of 250 grand, and that paid itself back in a year. So obviously, as soon as that's paid, they're obviously in quite a lot of profit. I don't know if he was just BSing me, or but I've tried to find it online. I don't know if you know anything about that kind of scheme.
Yes, there are a number of schemes running. They're normally financed by... These sort of schemes are usually financed by the large financial institutions, and I'm not going to go into names of them particularly, for solar farms, which is laying solar panels on racks in fields, and for wind turbines. And it is quite possible that if somebody was really shrewd, or a wind farm investor really wanted to get a deal done, a farmer could get his money back within 1 to 2 years. But it's got to be a very good installation, the right area, and you need it to be windy alley 365 days a year. So that might be a bit exaggerated. I would normally start expecting, if the farmers, depending on what the deal the farmer's done and what share he's put in, he'd probably get his money back in about 3 to 4 years, being realistic. But some farmers like to brag a little bit.
I just did that research. I like looking up this stuff. Do you know of any of those financial institutions you said that do that, or the names of the projects that they do?
Any of the big commercial banks, right. If you look online.
So high street banks or?
Not high street, commercial banks.
Okay.
If you need to go online and just commercial green energy finance.
Right. Okay. All right. Thanks.
Oh, brilliant! Thank you very much. I tutor and practice in architecture, so I'm constantly designing buildings and housing, and challenging my students as well. With the advent of the Passive House and the Passive House Trust, of course, they've commandeered the terminology passive, but we was always teaching and practicing passive design before then. And it's a perennial problem, is kind of cutting through the greenwash. And you're absolutely right with super insulating our homes. You know, they must be airtight, super insulated. We must have heat exchange mechanisms for the ventilation. I mean, it's absolutely crazy to be extracting air from our bathrooms and kitchens outside, because what air replaces that is the cold air from outside that then we use more energy to heat. So we need to kind of get to this passive design stage where we're kind of heat exchanging the ventilation. And but I've heard somebody mention today air source heat pumps. There's also, of course, ground source thermal. There's solar thermal, and there's photovoltaic. And I think probably a combination of those things are the best way forward. But they're not all perfect solutions. So how would you recommend, from your experience, what would your recommended installation be within a domestic property?
Thank you for the question. It's a good question. And it realistically depends upon the property and how people are living within the property. Heat pumps are fantastic pieces of technology. Generally speaking, I would not recommend a ground source heat pump for a domestic property unless it's a 12-bedroom mansion and people have a lot of money to drill a very deep hole in the ground. But I would also then, before going down that road, look at the permaculture and the environmental impact of drilling into the grounds, because it does make a lot of mess.
No, absolutely.
Yeah, I was involved in a trial project some time ago on the Isle of Sheppey with it was a government-sponsored project, and we had to drill a long way down into the ground. And the grass we were given was a communal grass area, and it turned into a muddy quagmire.
Yeah.
Fortunately, we had some spare money in the project. Most of the people on the estate were living in bungalows, and they were at the latter end of their age, not at the youth like I still pretend I am. And they all said, what are we going to do about all this mud and the grass and everything else? The solution that I came up with is I looked at the budget and I thought, I've got a few thousand we haven't spent yet. That's good. So I got them all together, bought some teas and cakes, and asked them what they wanted. And they all said they'd like a nice garden that they could use for flowers and grow their own vegetables in. But a lot of them were hips, wheelchairs, Zimmer frames, etc. And gardening was not a realistic proposition at that stage. The solution: I went out and bought some railway sleepers to make raised flower beds. I engaged with a local college where they had students doing gardening and horticulture to come and help. I took the old ladies and the people down, and we rented a couple of minibuses to the garden centre, and I let them go round and choose whatever they wanted to grow in their raised beds. We then had it all delivered with a few mountains of topsoil turf, and the gardening students helped all the old people plant beds for what they wanted. That was the solution. But fortunately, this one was a government project with a very large budget because they wanted the job done. Having said that, moving forward, the air source heat pump is now a lot more efficient than it used to be 10 years ago. So for domestic, I would normally recommend going for an air source heat pump. And anyone who doesn't know what an air source heat pump is, I'll explain it. Who's got a fridge in their house? Right, put your hand inside the door of the fridge. What do you feel? Go around the back of the fridge and touch that black radiator thing. What do you feel? Pardon? Hot. And that is exactly what a heat pump is. It sucks in the cooler air from outside, and through a refrigeration process, which I haven't got time to explain today, it intensifies the temperature. So you're now getting heat coming out on the other side at up to 60 degrees centigrade. That heat can then be transferred into a thermal store, which is a cylinder full of hot water, for hot water within the home, and a heat exchanger to deliver warm air through the house, or to deliver hot water to go through the radiators. The more modern systems actually use air-to-air for that, because by delivering air, one's getting constant change of air through the property. You're drawing in fresh air from outside and expelling a little bit of stale air, thereby running it at a virtually maintenance-free project, saving anything up to 40% over the running cost of if you were running with gas. Add the bonus to it, there is a government grant, it's called the Renewable Heat Incentive. For domestic homes, you will get £7,000 paid quarterly, and that's not £7,000 every quarterly, divided into lumps per quarter, over the next 7 years. So you're getting £1,000 a year towards the cost of the project. Has that been helpful?
Yeah, no, it's very helpful. Thank you. Is that what was the name of that finance initiative again? The
Renewable heat incentive.
The renewable heat incentive. And when does that come to an end?
That's still ongoing. There isn't an end date yet, but we live in turbulent times.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's really challenging actually, because if you're building a new house from scratch, of course you're building it to passive house standards, so it's super insulated, it's airtight. Right. So you virtually don't need any heating at all. But of course, with an existing property, and this is a real problem nationally, actually, with the 26 million properties that if we start building zero carbon homes tomorrow, we've still got 26 million housing stock that we have to retrofit, and deep retrofit as well. And that's the big challenge for us moving into the future of decarbonising.
It is a challenge, and it's one of the challenges we have. In fact, this coming Friday, I'm speaking with the head of building control and the planning team for Southend Council on a relatively new technology. It's called far infrared. What is far infrared? Well, basically, it's a white panel that goes on the wall or is hung on the ceiling, but it's a lot thinner than the domestic radiator. For the scientists in the room, we go through, light is basically a section of colours. And everybody has probably come across infrared heating, where you look up and this glaring red spotlight giving heat comes out and nearly blinds you. It's well beyond that. It's very similar to sunlight, but it sits in the radio wave spectrum beyond normal infrared to far infrared, but it's just before the spectrum of going into gamma rays, so you don't get fried. The only way I can explain it is it works on, in a simple term, it works on heating the thermal mass. And it heats thermal mass that's fluid better than a solid thermal mass. And guess what? The human body is quite fluid. So it starts to heat the thermal mass around the building. When you're walking down the street, you do a lot of this. You walk down the street, tree line, don't you? Right? And when you walk past a tree and you're standing within the shadow of the tree, how do you feel? Then when you get to that gap between the two trees, you start to feel nice and warm. And that is the sunlight coming through. And that's exactly what far infrared does. It emulates sunlight, but it doesn't... it emulates the sunlight, but it doesn't burn you or scald you, so it keeps everybody warm. By installing far infrared heating, it can be controlled and zoned within a home or a building for individual rooms. The savings against a direct electric convection heater is 66% on running costs. Thereby, installing far infrared and the right balance of solar panels on the roof with a storage battery, one can actually be running and have sufficient energy from the sun without having to pay a heating bill.
Fantastic. That sounds... I've not heard of that far infrared technology. I knew about the radiant heaters that we see outside pubs in the smoking areas.
Yes.
But that far infrared is new to me, so I'll be looking into that.
Catch up with me afterwards, and might get you in on a little seminar.
Fantastic. Look forward to it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you. Enjoy some more beer.
So we're going to have a bit of a longer break now. So to take advantage of the food that's available, menus are available on the bar, pizza and pasta. Obviously, come and get some drinks as well. And we'll see you for the next session at 3:30, I believe. Yep, with James Vesey Miller. Thanks, everyone.